Man, Benny, we should make this what I'm going to say right now part of the podcast. When I think that you can't get any better, dude, te aventaste, man. I mean, my God, you did a great job, Benny, with this intro. Outstanding, outstanding job.
Thank you. Thank
How
you,
did you did you select the song or did Bobby select the song?
I did. He selected one that I wasn't able to get.
Ah,
I just didn't have it in the system.
well, I'll tell you, Benny. When you last week, I go, man, Benny, you can't get any better. You just surpassed that expectation, brother. Te aventaste. Yeah. With that said,
I was actually holding that song for Juan Martinez, who's a retired deputy sheriff who went to DEA and ended up being the head DEA agent in Tijuana. I was holding that song for him, but I figured, Bobby matches this song, so I'm going to play this song with Bobby's intro.
Well, you know what? I wanted you to play at 007 because I tell everybody, hey, if there's a Chicano that is James Bond, it's Bobby. And you know what? With that said, guys, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, guys.
I know you guys had a wonderful time. Chalo, ¿cómo estamos? How you doing, brother?
Mute.
There's muted.
Chalo. Let's see, unmute him.
Bueno.
Okay.
Pues felicidades a todo el mundo, un fuerte abrazo de aquí de California. Estamos todos aquí. El año nuevo dije que ya no iba a hablar en inglés porque ya no tiene más poder. ¿Verdad, Sean?
Yeah, you know what he said.
Yeah, he said he forgot to speak English.
Hey, you're gonna see like the Rico's nachos. See, anyways, hey, well, Happy New Year, guys! A really big, big hug to all of you guys, man. Happy to be back after a long absence. I mean, if it wasn't one thing, was another with me, man. I got sick with bronchitis and fevers and stuff like that, and then I was at a funeral first, then dinner, then I got sick, and then we were on a break. So it's awesome, bro. I'm happy to be back.
Well, welcome back, brother. Guys, with that said, we have a great show today. We have an outstanding guest. I'm looking forward, but I want to give a quick disclaimer before we do. And the disclaimer is this. Last 2 weeks ago, Benny, you asked me who the guys were in the picture. And you know what? I had not seen the picture. Believe it or not, I don't pay attention. I mentioned Van Cruz, which is directly on the left, best sergeant San Diego PD has ever had. I was there for 27 years, and I'm telling you, one of the best sergeants, and he actually retired as a sergeant. That's me next to him. Now, the guy next to him, I had said it was Mark Tallman, but I know it's Chris Kilby. Yes, Chris Kilby. And I'm telling you, this guy right here, Chris Kilby, he's a legend within the San Diego Police Department, gang unit, narcotics unit. He's a very humble individual. I asked him to come on the show. He goes, Dave, I'm sorry, I can't. I don't like to speak in public, and I don't like to toot my own horn. But I'm telling you, I'm here tooting it for him. He is a legend within the gang unit, San Diego PD. You mentioned his name in Lincoln Park, one of the worst black gangs in San Diego. They tremble. They still tremble today. And Sean, he got a chance to work for you, right, Sean?
Oh, yeah. He was on my NARC team down in South Bay. Yeah.
Yeah. Outstanding cop. Chris, thank you he's a faithful watcher. We love you, brother, and hopefully one day you will come on. And the guy on the very far right, my right, your left, Bob Cristano, former NYPD correctional officer, and now I think he's the head of security for one of the big hotels in San Diego or nationwide. God bless.
David.
When I took over the NARC team down there, Chris was already on the team and stuff, and we're doing a workup on our first warrant that I was involved in, and Dave Highsmith was putting it together. May he rest in peace. And I'm asking all these questions like, which way the wind's blowing, are there kids, and all the tactical SWAT type questions. And Chris he was big. He was a big guy, all tatted out and stuff. And he looks down at me and he goes, "This ain't no fucking SWAT warrant." Okay, enough said.
Well, I'll tell you, talking about SWAT, talking about warrants, today's guest, and I'm going to hand it over to you, Benny, shortly. But Chalo, you had something? What were you going to say?
No, man, the guy on the far right. It looks like his thighs were up at where his arms are supposed to be, bro.
He was
You're a big guy there, David. But that guy, man, that's all I saw was guns on that guy, dude.
Yeah, he was a pretty big boy. I haven't seen him lately, but I'm sure he probably looks the same. Ceci,
Yeah.
welcome to the show. Iceman, welcome to the show. With that said, Benny, it's all yours, and I think you had something you wanted to start off with, Benny, and here you are.
Well, those guys are puro PD matones, man. Those guys were
Pues a huevo.
awesome. I thought Kilby was working the 5'9" brims, but I guess he worked Lincoln Park, huh?
He worked
he knew
5'9" brim
everybody
too.
down there.
He also worked 5'9" brim. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
he knew everybody in Southeast. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, our guest today is Robert Arce, man. This is a retired Phoenix police detective. Robert started his career in 1981 in the 80s. Robert became a patrol officer, like all of us when we start, unless you're a deputy, then you have to work in jail. Back then, he worked in some of Phoenix's most violent neighborhoods. By the mid-'80s, he was working undercover in narcotics, street gangs, Mexican drug cartels, human trafficking, anti-kidnapping unit. He had assignments with the DEA task force. He was on the FBI's violent street gang task force. I mean, Robert retired in 2005, and you would think that he would just quit and that's over. I mean, he's done. No, after retirement, he worked outside the U.S. Robert worked in Mexico, Bosnia, Croatia, Serbia, Iraq, Haiti, just to name a few of them. Robert has a very impressive resume and extensive investigative experience, especially in the world of undercover narcotics. Thank you for joining us, Robert.
Hey, Benny, you wanted to talk about Miranda warning? It's up.
Yeah. Let's bring Robert in because I want to ask him.
Okay, here we go, Robert. Robert's in.
So, Robert,
First
before
of
we
all,
start,
thank you.
gracias. So, before we get started, I'm going to ask you this question. Before we get started, as many might not remember, Phoenix was the ground zero. Phoenix was ground zero to the Miranda warning or the admonishment. On March 3rd, 1963, a young Phoenix woman was kidnapped, raped, robbed while walking to a bus stop. 10 days later, Ernesto Miranda was arrested by Phoenix police. That set in motion a series of court hearings, which resulted in the U.S. Supreme Court decision that would impact all of the way we do our interviews and the way we contact people. Can you tell us a little about it? I understand you told me a little bit about this. I understand that his son, Ernesto, was a Phoenix police officer.
His nephew is Dave Miranda. Dave Miranda joined the Phoenix Police Department probably 2-3 academy classes ahead of me, and we eventually got to narcotics. He got to narcotics maybe 6 months before I got there. He was a very good narcotics cop, good street cop, and he retired from Phoenix. But Dave Miranda is the nephew of Ernesto Miranda. An interesting thing about Ernesto Miranda, after all that case is over with, he was murdered at a bar in downtown Phoenix, a famous, notorious bar called La Amapola. La Amapola at one time was one of the bars in Phoenix where, all the Spanish speakers would go to because of the music and such a popular bar. My grandmother and grandfather used to go to that bar when they were young to tirar chanclazos, as we say, and used to go hang out there. And later, when I was a young undercover officer, I bought heroin in that bar. So it was that's the same bar that Ernesto Miranda eventually was murdered in after he was released due to the case from the Miranda rights and the after effect of that.
Yeah. What was his attitude towards that? I mean, do you know?
Don't know much about him, but I know that Dave used to say that Ernesto was a black sheep of the family. He was always in trouble, constantly in trouble. So it was like he wasn't very close to him, just that he was in and out of jail. He was very well known by all the cops that worked downtown, always carried a knife, was considered a violent person. And, you're involved in violence long enough, and eventually it's going to come back and get you. Yeah. But I know Dave said that he remembered when it happened, but he was very young. And I think it was his father's older brother.
Okay. Hey, Robert, can you tell us a little bit? Can you share with us about your upbringing? Where were you born, raised? What was your family dynamics? What were your goals growing up?
Well, I was born and raised in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm a third generation on my mom's side, first generation on my father's side. Tragically, I lost my father. I don't remember him. He was killed in a car accident before my 4th birthday. My mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer when I was 10, and she died 3 months after being diagnosed with cancer. So I was raised primarily by my maternal grandmother and grandfather, and lived just east of downtown Phoenix in a barrio called La 20th Street in Jefferson, which was one of the oldest barrios there in Phoenix. We lived there till I was in 8th grade. We moved a little further east to the 32nd Street neighborhood, another barrio. It wasn't as bad as the La 20. La 20 was in between the Dupavia housing projects, Golden Gate, the Sidney P. Osborne projects, and it was a tough place. And I think I'll say this, and I've told Dave this before, Contreras, God definitely was looking out for me and my brothers, because we were as high risk as they come. Living in that neighborhood, I mean, that area was a breeding ground for many of who became the leadership of La M, of the Mexican Mafia. I grew up with a lot of the guys that later became carnales. I trick-or-treated with some of them as a kid. But as a child, especially after my mother died, people used to say, when I was working with the PD, they would ask me, how was it that you made it out and you know so many of these people out here? Because a lot of the bad guys knew me. They knew my family. And I think after my mother died, I loved my grandparents so much. I just could not break their hearts. And I just loved them a lot. And, I still remember the farewell little speech that my mother made to us. And it's something that I think carried with me and made me just push forward and not fall into the same trap and let the streets eat me alive like they do to so many down there.
So what were your goals growing up? What did you want to do?
Well, first of all, there was a conspiracy for my first goal to keep me out. I wish I could have been a Major League Baseball player, but there was a conspiracy to keep no-talent hacks like myself out. So I played into high school. I played football and baseball in high school, and decided initially I was going to be I thought maybe I'll be a probation officer and work with juveniles. But 2 people very influential in my life. My high school football coach was a Phoenix police officer who later became my commander when I got to gangs and when I got to organized crime. He was the first person as a high school kid that planted that seed with me about, hey, have you ever thought of being a cop? They need guys that could speak Spanish, because he had heard me speaking Spanish with some of my teammates. Then my baseball coach in American Legion, my American Legion baseball coach, was also a Phoenix police officer, another legendary police officer. And just that little seed they planted, I think, was enough that when I was getting out of high school, I was like, what am I going to do? And eventually I said, well, maybe I'll be a probation officer, then switch over to become a cop. But at the time, the probation department was not hiring. So I went to school, goofed off primarily. And eventually, when I turned 21, I tested for the police department. And I got in really fast. I tested in August. Middle of August, I was in the police academy 1 month later. And I think one of the dynamics on that is I knew friends that were trying to get on the police department for years. And when I took the test and 1 month later I was starting the academy, I asked my recruiter, and he pulled out my application, held it up, and turned to the section on drugs, on arrest. He says, see this here? No, all the way across, it pushes you to the front of the line, especially being a Hispanic. And he said, all you have to do is pass the polygraph. And I did. And, I was clean. I did a lot of stupid things as a kid, but I never did any dope, never smoked dope, did nothing. So it really did push me to the front of the line. And I was in the academy just months after my 21st birthday, which launched my career and changed my life.
Hey, so Robert, tell us a little bit about those academy days, your first patrol assignment, your FTO, who was your FTO training, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I believe that your FTO really has a lot to do with what kind of cop, at least initially, you're going to be. And I was very fortunate. My FTO was a legendary cop with Phoenix PD, Art Smith. He was a Marine in Vietnam, which that generation, joining in 81, there was a lot of Vietnam vets that were the senior guys and were the tough cops that were working the street. So Art really helped shape me. He was very hard-nosed, but very compassionate. And during my training, he had me working plainclothes assignments. He had me doing he did a drug search warrant. He really exposed me to a lot. And in my academy class, I was the first one from my academy class out of 32 people to go solo. I went solo in 4 weeks and I think 3 days, and I was solo. And he was always there for me throughout my career. And I owe a lot to Art. He was a great mentor and someone that I literally wanted to be. I felt like I rode with John Wayne. So initially they put me out on the street, and they didn't know they put me back in the same bottom I grew up in. So people could never figure out how come I had so many sources, people, snitches from concerned citizens to drug addicts that I grew up with that were now drug addicts. It really helped me. They put me right back in the same neighborhood, worked the same projects that I ran around in as a kid, and I knew everybody. And I think most of you guys would probably agree with me. You grow up in a neighborhood like that, you get an education that you cannot get at a school. You get an education from learning how to talk to people, growing up in that environment, which helped me to do all the other assignments I did as a cop later.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, Robert, I'm going to hit you up with something that I know is very dear to your heart. Tell us about the execution-style murder of your friend, who was a DEA special agent, Richard Foss. He was murdered by an illegal alien in June 30th, I believe, of 1994, near Phoenix, Arizona. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Richard was very close. That still hurts many of us that obviously worked with him at the time. When he first came to Phoenix, he was a young DEA agent. I was already a narcs. And back then, DEA used to put their young agents with Phoenix officers to at least go out and do some street deals. And we clicked right away. I told David, he was a cigar buddy of mine. And we worked many cases together with him, along with Saul Ayala, who Contreras knows. And the whole deal was it was an undercover deal gone bad. As an undercover cop, we're more worried. A lot of people think, were you worried that someone's going to recognize you? We're not really. That's a secondary worry. Our first worry is that the bad guys legitimately believe we are crooks, that we are mafiosos, that we are drug dealers, and that their intention is to rip us off. So if most of the time, if somebody recognizes you, oh, he's a cop, they just disappear. Se alejan, they disappear. But if somebody legitimately believes you're a drug dealer and you're doing a big deal, like in Richard's case, they had flashed $140,000. These people were just a rip crew. Their only intention was to rip Richard and his partner off for the dope, and that was all. It's like in Phoenix, I don't know if you guys use the term in San Diego. In Phoenix, in the late 90s, early 2000s, the term bajadores, un bajador, meaning a rip, like they were part of a rip crew. And they use that a lot. Well, the guys that took Richard down, they were bajadores. They had seen the money at another location, so their intention was to kidnap him, put handcuffs on him, and when they put one handcuff on him in a body shop, he was with two informants, and they put him on his knees. And at that point, Richard had to make the decision: do I wait till the help gets here, or do I try to fight my way out? And for whatever reason, he knows. He decided to try to fight his way out. He reached for a firearm he had in his waistband, cranked off a round, shot one suspect, but there was 3 of them. And the first return fire tragically hit Richard's trigger finger right through his gun, disabled the trigger. So now Richard's holding a gun that doesn't work. And the 2 crooks stood over him and emptied 45s into him point blank while he was on his knees. Those 3 guys got arrested immediately, or as they were trying to flee, including the one that he shot. And the guy that gave the order fled to Mexico, and he was on the FBI's most wanted list for many years, top 10 most wanted. And he was finally captured, I believe, in Michoacan. He got in a shootout. They shot him, and they were all sentenced to life in prison.
Wow.
Hey, before we get to the next question, Ed Pacheco, thank you for watching the show. We got a question from G Fizzle. Welcome to the show, brother. Damn, that must have made the job a lot easier in ways growing up there. Did you ever have to watch your back, knowing who the hard guys were in the hood?
Oh, of course. And when I worked undercover, I never worked the neighborhood that I grew up in. And because I was born in the U.S., immediately after a while, I decided I'm going to work illegal aliens. Paisas is what I wanted to work, because then I'm not going to run into anybody that knows me unless they know me as a cop. They're not going to know me from growing up, because when I would work Chicanos, there were times I would go somewhere and somebody would see me and not, they knew me. And sometimes they knew I was a cop already. So eventually, at a certain point, I decided to primarily work your illegals, your Mexican nationals. And that way I didn't have to worry about running into somebody that already knew I was a cop. And so, yeah, you really have to be on your toes with these people, because there were times I would see somebody that I would recognize. I was recognized out on the street by a guy that looks at me during an intro, and he looks and says, "Hey," I say, "I know you from somewhere." And he did know me. I went to grade school with him. And he knew I was a cop. I worked the walking me to the projects. He knew me as a cop. And when he looks, he says, "I know you from somewhere." I made up a different name, and I said, "Duvavia, the projects, Edison School." And he says, "Orale," and he gave me a hug and sold drugs to me. Didn't realize that I was a cop, because he's probably on drugs and everything else, and just went right over his head. And I'm sitting there thinking any second he's going to, "Wait a minute, you're a cop. I've seen you in uniform." And it just went right over his head. Didn't remember.
Yeah, interesting. Go ahead, Chano.
What a trip. Hey, Bob, real quick, so I grew up in the town, where I ended up doing my 32 years, and I always saw it as, especially when you grew up, my parents didn't have a lot of money and stuff like that, so I grew up next to the projects. I actually lived in a house there, and probably what you went through the same thing. You treat people good, fair. People knew who you are. Your upbringing probably saved your butt from a lot of stuff when you were a street cop.
Absolutely.
The fact that people knew you probably could de-escalate stuff faster. People, when you would show up to calls, they would know, "Oh, I said, it's Bob, or it's Robert, whatever they called you at the time." And that's what I think, that's one of the benefits. A lot of people say that it's a disadvantage, but I lived in Calexico as a cop for probably about 20 years there in town before I moved out. Or actually it was 15 years, and nobody ever messed with my house. Nobody messed with my cars. So like I said, I think it's one of the benefits. If you're a good guy and you treat everybody fairly, you can do your job really good, because you also get a lot of information from your homies, because they don't want to talk to nobody else, but they'll talk to you. So here's question number 4, man. Hey, Robert, so why is Phoenix considered the nation's kidnapping capital, and what are the dynamics that come into play when it comes to that?
Okay, I'll get to that, but I just want to follow up on yours. Something really quick I'll go into. When I was a uniform cop working the walking to projects, I saw a guy, knew him for the neighborhood. He just got out of the joint. He was a pinto, and he had warrants, and we get in a fight. I was by myself. I didn't have my partner that day, and we rolled around, and I got him and get him cuffed. He's talking all kinds of crap to me all the way to the jail. And I'm just listening to him. We get to the jail, and I finally look at him and I said, "Hey, bro, this is not personal. This is my jale. And just like you got your job to do, it's not personal." He starts calming down. I'm getting ready to book him in, and I turn around and look at him because I know him. I say, "Hey, you want me to let your jefita know that you're in jail? You want me to let your mom know? Do you want to call her?" And he looked at me like, "Are you crazy? You're going to let me call my mom?" I let him call his mom on the phone right there. And he looks at me, thanks me, apologized. When he got out of jail, he calls me at the station and pretty much says, hey, Arce, I'm not a snitch, I'm not a rata, but there's some dudes that are selling dope to my nephews. You need to take care of it. And this stuff like this used to happen to me all the time. So it's just like, never make it personal. You know, if somebody needs a boot taken to them, take the boot to them, but stop once they give up. And that type of mindset helped me with sources and get people's trust. But anyway, going back to your kidnapping.
Hey, Bob, let me give you one. Check this out. Hey, so I'm patrolling on a Sunday, and I passed by, you know, Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. You know, in Calexico, 90% of the people are Catholic, and I see this parolee with a warrant coming out of church with his mom, and we lock eyes, and he looks at me, and he panics, man. He looks at me. He's a parolee at large. He panics, and I just wave at him. I keep on driving. So the next day I go, and I knew where he hangs out. The next day I go out there and pick him up and I arrest him, man. And so when I'm taking him to the jail, he's all like, dude, you saw me yesterday. How come you didn't catch me yesterday? I said, dude, I am not going to disrespect your mom or the church, bro. I said, it would have been a big old fiasco me going after you there. And then for your mom, I said, I probably would have given your mom a heart attack. And he never, same thing, never forgot that, man. And that guy used to, he passed away, sickness, not even, you know, the guy cleaned up his act, became a born-again Christian, a real born-again Christian, a guy, no drugs, nothing, moved up to the East Coast. But he used to call me with, you know, when something was going on and he knew that, you know, we weren't going to get any information, he called me up and he says, man, I can lead you where it's at, but I'm not going to testify. I said, dude, I don't care. I said, you just give me all the information you can give me, bro. So, you know, Bob, that's the style you had, I can tell. And you know what? God blessed you with a good career, brother. So anyways, question number 4. So why is it considered the nation's kidnapping capital, man?
At one time, Bob, not no more, but at one time when you were working.
One time.
Yes.
Yeah, at one time it just creeped up on us. We started noticing, and we knew it was happening a lot more than was being reported. But I think the main problem is uncontrolled immigration, uncontrolled illegal immigration. What happens is Phoenix went from, you know, we always had, you know, a lot of raza that we were always around, but all of a sudden when the cocaine explosion hit, it was like a stampede of bandits started showing up. Like the people that were tied into the drugs, the cocaine sales, smuggling, trafficking, whatever you call it, they started moving in, and we saw a dynamic, I mean, of violence that we never saw before. Just brutal violence and a lot of money. So what happened was a lot of the kidnapping originally started out where Rip Cruz ripping off other dealers. And if they couldn't get a dealer, they started kidnapping a family member, a daughter, a brother, or whoever. So we started seeing a lot of that. But the problem is when you have kidnappings, when you got a suspect and your victim is involved in illegal activity, a lot of times they don't want to call the cops. They're illegally in the U.S. They think they're going to get deported. Obviously, we're not going to deport a victim. So what started happening is when we had the crisis, we were having 250 kidnappings a year that were just, those are the reported ones, not the other ones. So what was going on was that the FBI normally you would think would investigate kidnappings, but 99.9% of kidnappings in Phoenix were illegal on illegal. The FBI does not get involved in kidnapping investigations unless they're U.S. citizens. So they were hands off. So what happened, the robbery detail had to take the kidnappings that were happening, and a lot of them were bandits would kidnap an owner of a joyeria, an owner of a carniceria, an owner of some little liquor store, a little tiendita. But a lot of those owners of those taquerias and all these other places were laundering money for the cartels. So these criminals knew where there was money, where they had stacks of money in their homes. So a lot of them would start out as a home invasion in the middle of the night, go hit somebody's house. And if they didn't find the money, they would figure the money was close by. So now they're holding them for ransom and calling family members to say, hey, we want the money. In the late 90s, early 2000s, especially after 9/11, the human smuggling problem really started, where we called them the super drop house era of Phoenix. Right before I retired, I started working human smuggling with ICE. I got attached to them. And we had a house in 1 week. We had 160 people in one house. A couple of weeks later, maybe a week, 10 days later, 180 in another house. And almost all of them were Central Americans. So what started happening, the bajadores, the rip crews, instead of ripping drugs, they were ripping human loads from each other. Or one group of polleros, human smugglers, would sell 10 illegals to another group, and since this group had to pay money for it, they would add more money. So they're calling, a lot of them were tied to human smuggling. So they would have illegals in their house, and they would call the family members in the East Coast, in Georgia, and Kentucky, or wherever, Chicago, and say, hey, aquí tenemos tu hermano. Here, we got your brother here. You have to come up with an extra $2,000. And these people were like, we don't have that money. So what they were doing is they were beating the relative over the phone so that the family on the East Coast or wherever could hear. And they would say, if you don't come up with the money by tomorrow, we're going to kill him, or we're going to beat his ass. We're going to sodomize him. So out of desperation, families were calling us from the East Coast, from other parts of the country, calling Phoenix PD because, well, who's doing it? FBI can't do it. Phoenix Robbery was doing them initially. Then I got assigned to this ICE group with the Arizona DPS, and then we started handling these kidnapping cases where now you're working with a family member, helping them with the negotiations to get somebody released, or trying to locate where they're calling from. It was an absolute nightmare. I mean, we never slept during that time.
Wow. You know, Bob, we were having the similar stuff here in Imperial Valley, where people were ripping the aliens from other sources, or we would have them calling family members asking for more money. And I remember in 2005 when I was assigned to the investigation unit, we did call Phoenix PD a bunch of times because people were calling us saying that they got kidnapped in Phoenix. So we would send family members out to Phoenix and put them in contact with them because we didn't know Phoenix. But it was big time, man. During that time, it was a big explosion of all that stuff. I remember that.
Hey, Bobby, you know what? That's still happening today. I mean, it's something that happened in the past. I think right now, because of all these immigrants that are coming across the border, it's probably happening more. And if we probably call border cities like San Diego, Calexico, I'm sure that their cases are doubling because of what's happening right now. These people that are coming across.
Also, what happened? Phoenix. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Bob.
What happened at that time? Phoenix PD, our management, and our politicians ignored this problem because they were just illegals. They didn't care. And what happened was there was 2 incidents. There was a shootout on the I-10 at rush hour where one group down in the desert on the Indian reservation, a group of bajadores took a load at gunpoint from another group, loaded them into their van, and hauled ass towards Phoenix. Well, the group that got victimized called their compadres, and they were waiting, and they had a shootout. People were killed. People driving at rush hour, and they're dodging bullets because of that. And then there was another one at 24th Street in McDowell. We called it the shootout at the OK Corral at an AutoZone, where there was these 2 groups had negotiated themselves a release and instead gotten a shooting. And people are running around in the middle of the day with multiple, shootings, all kinds of rounds at each other. And finally, the department said, we have a problem. But it was ignored. It was totally ignored. And even my bosses, I was working in the Organized Crime Bureau. I had a boss one day goes, after we had the house with 160 and 180, I wrote a memo and said, we need to form a task force. I wrote it. I sent it forward. And my lieutenant and a sergeant, they were not my bosses. They were belonging to somebody else. He says, you show me how this is organized crime. He said, how do we not know these are not just a couple of Mexicans with some big trucks and a tank full of gas that do this on the weekend? And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. The house with the 160, 180, those were $500,000 loads right there, easy. And I retired, and thank God another Phoenix officer resubmitted that memo, and I was already gone in Bosnia when they formed the task force that really stomped these guys out of the way.
Go ahead, Big Sean.
Saludos, Vincent.
Hey, Bobby. When during the cocaine crack explosion in the 80s, were you working patrol or working narcotics, or what other assignments did you have during that period?
I was in patrol when it was just starting, and we started seeing a lot of California gangsters. The black gangsters were showing up, and they were using the Phoenix black gangsters to initially start moving the crack. And then it spread to the Mexicans and everybody else. So I was working or walking the city housing projects when we first started seeing it, and then immediately moved over to undercover narcotics. And it was on every street corner. And when I first got to narcotics, I got assigned to what we call a street level unit. So I was going out buying, it was different. We were cowboys. I heard the interview you guys did with Hector. And I was like, it was deja vu listening to what he was saying. We were going out onto the street and buying, we'd come get our money, hit the street, and make 2-3 buys, sometimes 4 buys in a shift. No backup, no cover, just went out and made buys, come back at the end of shift, do our paperwork. Nobody would get arrested, and we would make as many buys as we could, try to spin off into other suspects. And then eventually, 6 months later, we would file grand jury warrants, and everybody would get rounded up. I started with the street unit, but eventually I had an informant call me one day that had a pound of coke. And at that time, I was only making like, $20, $40 rocks. And I got introduced to doing, pound kilo deals. And after that, my training officer or the guy that showed me that way finally said, hey, we're going to get killed. Don't be doing it for no $20, $40 rock. Let's go down guns ablazing doing kilo deals. And once I did my first deal, we moved off. And although I still did street level, I concentrated on the multi-kilo cocaine deals, the multi-pedazo heroin deals, weed deals that were, 50 pounds or more. And then I started doing a lot more work with DEA because they had the money to pay our informants and the money to do some buy walks.
Hey, Bobby, tell us about when you were in patrol, all of a sudden they send you to gangs within a year, I believe, and then right away to narcotics. Tell us on your first day of narcotics. Well, we were talking before the show, how you weren't expected to last more than a day. Tell us the story, how that went.
Well, I think part of my problem with, I was I grew up and I'm from Navarro, so I was very streetwise. I had a lot of informants. So I sometimes think I got to some of these specialty units too young. And when I first got to narcotics, I get there first day. I walk in, I'm so excited I made it there. And the guy that's supposed to train me, may rest in peace, he's passed away. I forgave him later. He comes up to me, he goes, hey, rookie, don't get comfortable. There's several grievances because they don't think you don't have enough time to be here. And you just got picked over other people that already had paper. Because I didn't even have a transfer request. I had done a temporary in narcotics about 8 months earlier. And my very first day when I showed up on my temporary, I bought heroin within an hour of getting there. And it was like, at the time, they were like, no one's ever done this on a temporary. They usually just watch. And I went out and bought heroin with a snitch. So when I got there, I went to my boss and I said, hey, what's going to happen? Are they going to grievance my transfer? He said, well, my only advice to you is go out, kick some ass, and this will go away. Because, yeah, there's some grievances being filed because you got here too soon. And so he didn't have to tell me twice. I already had snitches. I went out and immediately started out. I mean, I was making more buys than anybody in the unit. And there was 3 different squads. And then I started making some bigger buys, and it all disappeared. So it was just my first buy I ever made I'll have a funny story. My first big buy that was a pound. It was a pound coke deal, and I had a snitch come forward. A little bison says, "Hey, I got a compa that has a pound of coke, and they want to sell it and go back to Sinaloa for the holidays." And I had never done anything but small deals. And a pound now is nothing, but back then it was a lot of dope. So I called one of the veterans, and we went out, met the guy. There were two brothers, and they said, "We don't believe in violence. You guys show up with the money. We'll do the exchange and everything will be good. We don't believe in guns. Somos bien tranquilos, bien pacíficos, blah, blah, blah. No, we don't believe in guns either." So we leave, we come back. Well, now we're going to do the deal. We show up, and they walk me over. We're in a parking lot. We walk over to the car. They have me sit in the passenger seat of their car, and they said, "Sit down." So me, Johnny, and the two bad guys are here on the passenger side. And they said, "Reach under the seat." So I'm reaching. I don't feel nothing. And they're like getting mad because I'm reaching. I don't feel. And they're saying the pound of coke is under there. And I can't feel it. They get mad, tell me to get out. And when the guy bends over to reach under there, a 9mm falls out of his fucking jacket and lands right at our feet. The same guy that says, "We don't believe in guns. We don't believe in violence. We're just business people." And the gun, here's a 9mm at our feet. And Johnny, who was very seasoned, I was ready to draw down on him. I didn't know what to do. Johnny grabs a gun, and he looks at them. He pulls the magazine out, chambers around out, and says, "Que miedosos." What cowards. Oh, you guys are so scared. Que culones. And he says, "I thought you guys didn't believe in guns." And they're like, "Oh, we're sorry. We're sorry." So Johnny goes, "Mira, para que no tengan miedo. So you guys won't be scared. Here's your gun back." He gave them their gun back and the round. And now they're apologizing. And they go to the trunk of the car. They lock their gun in the trunk of the car. And they walk up. They lift their shirts. They do a circle to make sure there was no more firearms. Me and Johnny are armed. So we go back. The pound of coke is under there. We give the signal. People jump out. They get arrested. That was my first buy besides a street level buy. And that started.
Bob, go ahead, Bobby. Bobby, we have another question from one of our listeners. Go ahead. We have another question from one of our listeners to Robert and Benny. From Ed Pacheco? What was it that gave you guys the edge in being successful while working undercover? I'm sure you both had close calls, and thank you for your service. Thank you, Ed. Yeah, the question was, what was it that gave you guys the edge in being successful while working undercover?
Well, for me, it was just knowing. Yeah, for me, it was just knowing the game. You got to know people, and you got to know how to talk to people. I was raised in Calexico, in a real poor area, so I knew how they spoke, how they acted. So and mine was actually, my first deal was actually in Lakeside. I sold some dope to a biker mama, and she was actually a stripper in San Diego, but she was owned by the Hells Angels. It was right across from the Lindo Lake at the apartments there. And I wasn't nervous. I mean, I thought it was a piece of cake. I had a lookout team, I had a surveillance team, I had a rescue team, all that stuff, and it was just pretty simple.
Go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah, I think just growing up in the environment that growing up in the neighborhood I grew up in just helped me. It helped me, like I said, being able to talk to people. And I grew up. I had heroin addicts in my family. There was tecatos in my family. I saw what it did to my family. My grandparents, the suffering, the crying. Two of my primos eventually died of heroin overdoses. And so when I first wanted to go to narcotics, I was like, obviously I knew I was never going to put an end to it, but I wanted to be the worst nightmare. The ones that were doing that shit, I wanted to go after them. And I think it helps to have a screw loose a little bit, because right now I think of some of the situations I put myself in. There's no way in hell I would do that today. But you're young, and you always believe if something bad happens, it's going to happen to somebody else, not me. And everyone, to me, I always had a healthy amount of fear, but not something that controlled me. And I think when that fear becomes something that controls you, it's time for you to get out.
Hey, Bobby, what is the difference of the importance of an undercover operation? And is there a difference, if you can explain this to our listeners and whatnot, is there a difference between being undercover work and plainclothes undercover work?
Yeah, of course. Well, first of all, I think the importance is you need police officers to be proactive. We cannot, and right now with this defund the police movement, our units, those proactive units at the Phoenix Police Department that were going after career criminals before they did something, or at least following them around, they're down to skeleton crews or they don't even exist anymore. So you need proactive as far as I was very fortunate. I worked as a young undercover cop, part of a undercover plainclothes unit that followed drug addicts around. Like we would go to burglary detectives and burglary would say, hey, we have some, we're getting hit and we think these guys are doing the burglaries. And if we didn't have nothing going on, we would go sit outside the methadone clinic in the morning in undercover cars, plainclothes, and watch the tecatos show up in the morning to get their methadone, para la malicia, because they're having withdrawals. And then as soon as they get their methadone, hey, I'm sure we didn't invent it. So they go get their methadone and then they go out and what are they going to do? They're going to go do residential burglaries. They're going to do organized shoplifting, or they're going to jack people. And that's why I think it's so important. We need to be proactive because if you're an addict, you're not going to go out and get a job. Your job is to steal and support your habit. And we would follow these guys, and sometimes their cars would break down. They would run out of gas, and they start hitchhiking, and we're picking them up. They don't even know we've been following them, and drop them off in an area, and they're go out. We watch them do a burglary. So I got to see that side, and then in working in narcotics, going into drug houses when I was doing street level, see burglary loot in the Paisa dope dealers' homes, and then later I worked in an undercover storefront operation unit, where I was buying. My job is to go out and meet burglars. So where do you find burglars? They're drug addicts. So I'd go to those hotels where all the drug addicts hang out and pretend I was looking for someone. Hey, what are you looking for? Hey, se encuentra el chino. ¿Cuál chino? Throw a name out there that el indio, el chino, el güero, whatever you want to say. Well, why are you looking? You want some coke? No. He called and he said he had some cuetes. Or he had this, or he had that. Oh, I get that. And now I was taking them to the storefront or buying their shit to another person. I mean, that's the way it works. There's no secret. That's the way it happened, even on the street with these people. So I got to see the surveillance side, the dope side, where people are taking stolen loot, burglary loot, to the dope man. Now the dope man is like, what am I going to do with all this stuff? And then I was in the unit that was buying stolen cars, property. I mean, me personally, probably bought 600 stolen cars during that time because we were buying a bunch. San Diego PD sent a task force that were going to start a storefront to us, and they rode with us because our unit was a famous unit that had been around for a long time. So
hey, Bobby, I don't know if you got a chance to see that picture. Is that you when you were working undercover? That picture? This one right here?
Yes. I was doing a deal. We had an informant that we needed him to get out of Dodge. So he introduced me. I was probably 27 years old. I was a kid. And he introduced me. That source has passed away many years ago. I learned a lot from him. That source was a cop in Mexico / drug trafficker, got popped, started working for us. I learned how to talk so much the mannerisms of how they talk to each other. But he introduced me as a nephew of his, and I took some guys down with 3 kilos of coke. I'm in a holding cell at the main police station, handcuffed, and my buddies come in and go, hey, asshole, look at the camera, and I look down. So you can't tell, but I'm handcuffed. And then they came in and made an excuse why they had to pull me out. And once they pulled me out, that gave our source a little bit of time to move out of his apartment and get out of Dodge. He was a professional snitch that moved all over the place. So yeah, those are the days, man. You can't see, but I'm wearing some cowboy boots, and Rudy Casillas and myself there with 3 kilos there. So
El
it was a
macizo.
great time. El macizo. And I took him on a deal because Rudy, I would take him as my bodyguard. And one day, some paisas told me, hey, leave the killer. Don't bring the killer next time. They go, oye, deja la cara de matón. No, deja esa cara de matón. Déjalo ahí en la casa. They were afraid of him.
El macizo.
El macizo.
I thought it was Benny there for a moment.
It was.
Hey, Robert, I know that you've done a lot in your career. What was one of the most dangerous assignments that you were involved in?
So many, but I'll think of one. I had an old partner. I was at the storefront operations unit, and an old partner says, hey, I got a snitch that wants to do an intro for a guy with a lot of heroin, close to maybe 12, 16 pedazos of heroin and ounces of heroin. But he says, I'm not comfortable with my Spanish. Do you want to do it? And I said, yeah, I'll do it. So I go out and meet the guy out on the street. And it's, in front of a Circle K at night. And the guy was just a nasty, kind of like trying to bully me. And he shows up and, hey, let's go over here, in Spanish. He tells me to get another car. I have to follow him. He drives around, make sure that we didn't have a surveillance. And all of a sudden he pulls into the back of an apartment complex. It's almost midnight. And I'm in the back of an apartment complex, no surveillance. No one knows where I'm at. And back then, I'll tell you, we're cowboys. And all of a sudden he gets out of the car and I'm with the snitch. And he touches his finger across my chest, like feeling for a wire. I slap his hand away. He says, we're going to do this deal, but if you're a cop, si tú eres policía o un dedo, a snitch, you're going to die. Because he says, I'm not going to jail. And I looked at him and, I was like, hey, you think I'm going to jail? I said, I put a bullet in my head first, but I'll kill you before I kill myself. And he's like, man, that's the way we're supposed to do it. With como hombres. And he shakes my hand. Well, I hit him up for 12 ounces of heroin, 12 pedazos. And he's just trying to bully, very aggressive. And when the deal's finally going to go down, we meet at a parking lot by a Burger King. And he insists that I show up by myself. Benny, any of you guys that work UC, I'm sure we're on agreement. If you allow yourself to get robbed, if you expose yourself and make it easy for a criminal to rob you, they will rob you. They might have their intention. They're going to show up and sell you dope, but if they see you slip up, they will rip you off in a heartbeat and take your money and now have the dope for somebody else. So the guy was trying to play games with me. You show up by yourself, but I showed up in one car, pulled up, parked. My other partner pulled over here, and he wanted to know why there's somebody else. Well, he had 3 guys with him, and he wanted me to show up by myself. Well, the long story short, finally, the dope shows up. He has me get inside his car. No, my car. I'm on the passenger seat of my car, door open, legs sticking out. He gets on the driver's side. And he has a bag and he passes it to me. And I look at it. There's 12 pedazos of heroin. And look at it. I give the signal. I give a signal. I yell at my partner, hey, traiga la feria. The money's on the way. And as I'm waiting, it's nighttime. We had a new guy in the unit that got too excited. And instead of sneaking up, he's running from way across the parking lot with a handgun. Police running, all chingon. He's going to help take this big arrest. Well, this guy's sitting next to me, and I'm trying to distract him. He turns, he sees him, and he looks at me, doesn't say a word, lifts his shirt, and starts going for a handgun in his waistband. And I'm next to him. So I punch him. He was wearing glasses. I broke his glasses into his face. He turned, and since I had one leg out, I wanted to roll out and pull my gun and ready for it to come over. And I wish I could say I did some James Bond move, trying to get out. No, I tripped over my size 13 feet and fell down like a big lump. Boom, I fall on my back. And I pulled my gun, because my gun was back here. So I reached, and as I start reaching up, I hear all hell break loose at his window. I didn't know that Saul Ayala and Richard Foss, the DEA agent who was later killed, were just by luck, they were in the car right next to me, and I didn't know they were there. They were laying. They heard me give the verbal bus signal. So Richard had an MP5, Saul was there, and it was over. So, you know, all of a sudden I look up and I can see them. I'm under crossfire. I start rolling like I was on fire to get out of the line of fire. They have to shoot this asshole. And I later try to tell people I did this slick James Bond roll move and just get up and shoot him. No, I fell. I just fell down. That's true story. So
the road rash.
That was a close deal. What was that?
That was the road rash.
Oh God, I look like a sugar cookie. I look like a sugar cookie from all the damn rocks that stuck to me.
Hey, it's all funny now, but back then it probably wasn't funny.
Yeah.
No, not at all. And get this, continuation of that story. He goes to prison. I went to trial. He saw me every day. He was convicted. He goes, and typical, he probably did 7 years, gets deported. I'm working gang squad, off-duty job now in uniform, and he pulls up to the restaurant I'm working, and I recognize him. And he doesn't recognize me, and I thought, here it is. He's walked straight to me. I'm in the parking lot of a Mexican restaurant, a taqueria, and instead he asked, can I park my car here? I thought we were going to start throwing down because he was like, hey, there's that guy that threw me in jail. And he was back illegally as a legal reentry. So what I did is I got a hold. One of the women knew who he was. And on Monday, I called ICE, and they went over and arrested him. And he had a firearm. And they did him for illegal reentry with a firearm and went back to the joint. Yeah.
And he probably got more time over that than for the coke arrest, right?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chalo.
All right, Robert, what are you doing now? Have you written any books, conducted any training, started a business? I mean, what are you doing now that you're según tú, you're retired, right? I don't think so. You look like you're a very active man. What are you doing?
No, obviously I did the 10 years outside the country in other assignments, working in Department of Justice and and then I came home. I wrote for Breitbart News for 2.5 years about the cartels, the border. I've done some consulting, and I was working for another media company out of Miami. I was their Spanish-speaking law enforcement subject matter expert. They kind of ran out of money. We're waiting for something. If something happens, they've told me that if something happens, they're going to bring me back. And I actually wrote a script. When I was writing for Breitbart, some guys got a hold of me from New York, and we wrote kind of like a screenplay, but we ran into some roadblocks. But it was kind of like a series loosely based on my character that starts in Haiti, where I ran an anti-kidnapping team, moves to Mexico with flashbacks to my undercover days in Phoenix. So we'll see what happens. But just ran into a roadblock, and maybe you'll start looking at that. But that and just doing this kind of stuff, hanging out with all my brothers.
That's right.
Brothers and sisters. Yes.
Hey, brother, you know what? Ya se nos fue el tiempo. Time's gone by. But, man, I know you're coming back for 3 more episodes, and Benny has the dates when you're coming back. We're looking forward to it, man. Like I always say, you know what? You're the Chicano James Bond. But right now you broke my heart when you said that you couldn't do the double black flip when the guy was getting ready to shoot you. But you know what? But it's okay. You're still the Chicano James Bond.
Well, I tried, man. I tried. But it's been a pleasure. Un placer. Un fuerte abrazo.
Hey, Benny, any last words for Bobby?
Well, Bobby's coming back. We're going to cover all those different countries and the real James Bond kind of crap, and we're also going to cover, how we did the series with the 10 deadly errors of law enforcement. Yeah. I was talking to Bobby, and we're going to do the 10 deadly errors of an undercover agent. And I was telling Bobby, maybe we can get Hector Rios as kind of, they could bounce off each other, I think it would be really good.
And you know what? Sure. We're going to have one of his camaradas, a guy that actually, when he talked about that came up with with Boss, with the MP5, he's going to be coming on the show. Sal Ayala, so he'll be coming on.
So James Bond.
It's gonna be oh no, ese es cabrón, ese es matón. That dude is bad, man. Wait till you meet him. With that said, Chalo, anything else for Bobby?
Hey,
Hey,
Bobby.
David.
No, I mean, thank you very much, Bobby. You brought back some good memories just talking about Phoenix, man.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Big Sean, anything else?
Thanks, Bobby. Can't wait to hear the next episode.
Hey, Bobby, Happy New Year, brother. Thank you very much. And I'll give you a call tomorrow so we can talk about that other thing. Again?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, thank you, brother. God bless you.
Mhm.
Thank you
God
for
bless.
everything, man.
Hey, later, bro.
Gracias. All right.
Later, bro.
Hey, what did I tell you guys?
Weather
Wow.
Good
volada,
show.
¿quién fue?
Oh, that time went by like that, didn't it?
Fast.
Yeah. Wait till he comes back and talks about Bosnia, Iraq, especially Haiti, right, Benny? Haiti,
Yeah.
what he did in Haiti.
I mean,
that'd be
the
dynamic.
picture. He sent me a lot of stuff on those countries, and obviously some of the stuff we can't show because YouTube will shut us down. But I mean, he was involved in suicide bombings, and he's got photos, and like I said, a lot of the stuff is graphic for as far as YouTube standards, you know. So we don't want to get shut down because of that.
No, and you got to be careful with those Bosnians, bro. They like to decapitate people.
Yeah, great show. Benny, tell us about next week's guest. And I got his picture up, by the way. Tell us, next week, it's going to be dynamic. Go ahead, Benny.
Well, it's going to be another Ayers.
Yeah.
we have another warden. We have a retired CDC warden, Art Calderon. You know, he came through the ranks just like Ayers did, you know, but he was a guard at DVI, at Deal the Vocational Institution in Tracy in '66. After years of numerous assignments, he served as a warden in Norco, San Quentin, and he mentioned some other places. I can't remember him right now. I think there was one in the Valley, Centinela, or I think it was Centinela. He also served there. Tehachapi. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was Centinela and Tehachapi, but he was a warden there. I mean, this guy has so much experience. I mean, he was a warden on 4 executions that he was there. He actually, you know, some of them, you know, there's stories about that, you know. So much information that he can provide to us, and it's going to be exciting, man. The guy has, I mean, a lot of experience. He was an old-time CDC guard, so he's in no nonsense. He hates the Norway Project. He talks about, when I met him today, he kept talking about all the crap that's going on in CDC right now, which would have never happened when he was there. You know, it's going to be good. You know, I mean, it's going to be fascinating just to have him.
Hey, Benny, real quick, like you brought up the word that Norway project. You know, it's already being introduced, right?
San Quentin,
Yeah.
San Quentin.
No, Centinela. My neighbor's is a guard there in Centinela. He told me that the word already came down. It's already being brought up in their briefings that they're going to start doing it too here pretty soon, and they are pissed off. They are pissed off.
¿Sabes qué, Charlo? He was telling me something that I never thought about. That he said that back in the '60s, and CRC,
Bless you.
which is in CRC is that in where's that?
That's in Norco, right there by your house in Norco.
Yeah, CRC back in the day in the '60s, the female inmates, you know, because they house the female inmates, they used to house them there. They used to have dances where the females danced with the prison guards. So he says, you know, he said, and it was kind of frowned upon. Then it happened for a short period of time. Then CDC decided to get away from that. So he says, so there's been a lot of wild stuff that's happened before with CDC, but this one's completely out of line. He said with the Norway Project and all the different things they're playing around with, you know.
Well, I'll tell you guys, we are blessed. We got the guests that are coming up. I think we're booked all the way till April, right, Benny, right now?
Yeah, we're kind of starting to work on May right now.
Yeah. Guys, the guests that we have coming on, I mean, Art Calderon's coming on. Mundo Mendoza's coming on in 2 weeks. We have the CIA, the guy who wrote the book. Rick Prado coming up. After him, we got Kevin Moina. After him, we have a referee, world famous referee. Guys, we have so many great guests. I'm excited. I look forward to our Tuesday show just to meet these legends that I've read about, that I've heard about, and now I get to see them. And today with Bobby, what a blessing. With that said, Benny, our last words. Ya se nos fue el tiempo. Go ahead, Benny.
Well, just everybody that's out there, just be aware that shit's happening. Uh, things move fast. Be ready, man. Just be prepared for the battle of your life, man. Survive. Don't give up. Head on a swivel and watch your back. Yeah.
Chalo.
Well, like I've always said, integrity means everything, especially right now with everything that's happening. I mean, money's getting tight again for some households. Guys, don't take the bait, man, and don't live beyond your means. I mean, because that's gonna really, really test your integrity. Be safe out there. Like I said, integrity means everything.
Big Sean.
I hate to say this, but I think this year, and piggyback on what Benny said, this is going to be a very interesting year politically and within our country. And for those of you that are on the front lines, watch your back. I think, hopefully I'm wrong. I think the shit's going to hit the fan somewhere, and it's going to be in this country.
Always remember, live a purpose-driven life. Live every day like it's your last day on earth, and you're never too old or too young to volunteer to do something to change somebody's life. Remember, you don't need a uniform. You don't need a badge. Whether you're an ex-con or ex-cop, you know what? Volunteer. Do something to change somebody's life, because we're always living sheepdogs. Make a difference. With that said, brothers, have a good weekend. I look forward to the warden next week. Bobby, once again, thank you. God bless
Thank
you.
you, Bobby.
God bless you guys.